We'll give it a couple minutes while so everyone can get in. Hello, Felicia.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
I can.
Can you still hear me now that I have put my phone down?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
I'm just going to get some invites out, so give me just a second here. Okay, I'm going to do this over here. So, are you ready? I'm very excited to talk to you about the book. I'm very excited.
I'm ready. I've practiced a little bit of reading some of the passages just to, a trial mini runs.
Well, Felicia, I've been trying to get you to read to me for months. So I set up this whole storyteller thing just so I could get you to read.
Oh, really? Hey, listen, I could drive down to your place at bedtime and read you bedtime stories.
There we go. You'll have to deal with the cat. He's always wanting something at that time of night. Okay, hold on just a second. Okay, so I'm going to get on my computer here so that I can, on Pija, send out the notification. And welcome, Carol, Tess, and KPSSR. We are going to get started here in just another moment or so. We want to give women a chance to get in here to join us for our next episode of the Red 10 Storyteller. How are you excited? I know you were a little nervous this morning. How are you feeling now?
Um, no, I'm well, yeah, a little nervous, but not too horribly nervous. I'm just typing a message to someone who's trying to find the space. Um, look up to the top. What do I call that? Scrolling banner.
Yes, the scrolling banner. Sorry, I was sending out another post.
Right.
I was putting a post up. I'm sorry.
We're both multitasking.
I know, and I am famous for not being able to do two things at once. So there we go.
I warn you
Um,
that I'll be, washing windows and doing some dusting and vacuuming during this phase.
that works. That works. I mean, we might get to the point that I might. I'm just hoping that the dogs cooperate, but I think
Right.
they are.
Mhm.
I don't know that Nat will be joining us today. She's a little bit under the weather.
Oh,
So
really?
so it'll be you and I speaking. And then once Felicia and I get done speaking, if you have any questions or comments or want to talk about the book, we will be doing invites up to the panel. So oh good, people are starting to come in. So let's talk a little bit, Felicia. Let's go back a little bit before the book, before we start getting into. Felicia's gonna read some passages from the book for us today. I do want to just put this out there, and I'll say it a couple times during the space. Felicia's book deals with trauma and abuse when she was a child. So if that is going to be upsetting for you or too much, we absolutely understand. No one will be offended if you have to bow out during those times. So, and we're not, we don't, we're not going to get into graphic stuff. So that's not a problem. Don't worry about that. But I do want to go back. Let's go back to, I want to ask first, can you give us a little background on when you first realized that you wanted to put pencil or pen to paper? About what age did you
Oh, the
start
very,
doing that?
very, very first. I was 8 years old. I was at school, and we had an assignment to write a poem about safety, and these poems. I think it was a provincial contest in Ontario, um, and so I wrote a little poem about water safety, about being careful where you jump into the water. And, you know, I won. I won a gold coin, a dollar coin for, no, I guess it must not have been gold, silver. I won a silver coin for that poem. And after that, that was it. I was going to be a writer.
What was it about that coin though? I mean, like, did it was just like you felt like for me, art is a compulsion. I feel weird if I'm not doing it, right? With your writing, could you sense even back then this was going to be an outlet for you? Like this,
Well,
there.
yeah. I mean, and that was just sort of a flippant beginning. When people praise you for something that you've done, it makes a lot of people then want to keep on doing that thing, right? Because if you're good at something and people recognize that you're good at it, well, why would you stop? But yes, it was it's always been a compulsion for me to put pen to paper, and I was writing poems, throughout my adolescence, and through university, writing a lot of poems. I took poetry writing classes, and
Okay, so you did poetry and then you have your essays. Are you doing were you doing fictional longer pieces or short stories or
oh
anything as
well,
well?
I tried, but unfortunately, or I don't know, I can't write fiction. I can't make up stuff. I need the facts. Um, so
It's a different mindset, right? It's a different mindset.
it is. It is. Um, would you like to know about the opera libretto that I wrote?
Of course.
It is about somebody else's life. It's biographical. And I researched and researched. I read all kinds of biographies about this woman, the Empress of France, and then I wrote more or less her life story for opera, to be set to music. And I could do that because I could, as long as I've got the facts, whether they're my own facts or somebody else's facts, I can work with the facts.
I think that's really what's interesting about art, whatever you're, and to me, every woman has art in her. It's just whatever is your passion, whether it's writing, painting, photography, com- building a computer, whatever. That's everyone's version of art. And I think um for me, the fact like you and I are the opposite sides of that coin that you found, right? Where for me, my brain when I was a kid went to I lived in a like I made up stories in my head of this is the life I wish I had or whatever, and I kind of avoided the facts. So I mean, I think that has we all have, we're wired a certain way, and I think that's awesome. I love the uniqueness within each one of us that way. Okay, so you did the opera, you did it. So let's fast forward a little bit. Let's talk about what made you to decide to put this book together, a little bit of God, the essays, and we'll get into the subject and everything. But when was that moment for you that you decided? And for the listeners, this is a self-published book. Felicia did the red tent helped her, but Felicia did everything to get this book published all on her own because as we all know, being Turban, we can't get published or produced anywhere. So I just want to give you a big shout out for that. So let's go back to when you first thought about, hey, I need to turn this into a book. What was that moment like for you?
Well, I should explain a little bit more about the passion for writing,
Yeah.
which I had put on hold for about 10 years. As an adult, I sort of followed a spiritual path that I thought required um, all of my time and attention, and that writing would just be too much ego. I do write a bit about this period of my life. I think it was a good thing to follow for me being a very, very damaged woman in her early 20s, to grip hold of a spiritual path that stopped me from losing my way entirely. You know, stopped me from drowning. It stopped me from going into who knows what awful directions. But it was about becoming honest and humble, sort of. And so I focused a lot of attention. And being honest is really, really hard. You know, I'm not sure that everybody understands how hard it is to be honest with oneself, first of all. And writing can be a way to avoid the truth, Pija. You know, you can, and so can art. You know, you can make a work of art of your pain and suffering, and not arrive at the truth of that pain and suffering, of what caused it and what might help alleviate it. So before I began therapy, I had had basically 10 years of silence, which was really, really hard for me. I used to have dreams in which I wrote whole books orally in my mind. But after I'd been in therapy for a couple of years, I found I was keeping a diary. I was keeping a diary of everything that I was thinking and feeling, everything that I was uncovering. And within 2 years, I was putting those diary entries into a form that other people might want to read. So not writing for myself, but writing for others. And at the end of 5 years, I had what I thought was a book. It was about half of what is in the book now. And I sent it out to, at that time, you didn't need a literary agent in Canada. I sent it out to 40 publishers. I got some very, very positive responses, but nobody would publish it. And then I just,
What was the reasoning you were getting back?
well, this was in the 90s. And it had not been 10 years since the world in the West had discovered that parents and family members and fathers might actually sexually assault their children. This had been a taboo subject, and it only came out about in the 80s. And so some women wrote about their experiences of being sexually assaulted in childhood, and what it led to in their adult lives, and the process of recovery. I mean, and that was enough. I sent my manuscript out to all the publishers who had published one such book, and I got responses even from women's presses. I got responses, well, we've already done one of those books, and we don't want to do more and get known for that sort of thing.
Yeah, because it was still back then. It was still a time where they were telling society that some greasy drifter was the only
Yeah,
danger to
yeah, yeah,
kids.
yeah. Um, and these books, I read the books that came out, memoirs by women who'd uh, experienced and were able to talk about, to write about their experiences as abused children. And I read very, very good books. But most literary critics at that time were men writing, the book reviews in newspapers and magazines. I believe probably still more than half would be men. And they began calling these sorts of memoirs viclit, victim literature. And you can just hear the male sneers, at anybody thinking that a memoir of recovery from sexual abuse was worth writing about and worth reading about. It's not for those men, it was not a heroic journey. They wanted to read. I mean, every year I think a new book is published by some guy who's climbed Mount Everest or paddled across the Pacific Ocean on a sliver of wood. These are male heroes' journeys. and they don't recognize or appreciate female heroes' journeys, which is the journey to overcome the oppression that we experience as children.
You're absolutely right. And so when you sent the book out and then no one wanted to publish it, it was after that that you have the 10-year break, or was it was after that before you came back to this, correct?
I had the 10-year break first, and then
Okay.
I wrote the first half of this book, which I thought then was a full book, and then I kept on writing. I wrote a quartet of further essays that were different in tone because I was farther away, from the immediacy of the healing. And I sent a couple of those out to literary journals, and they got published. And then I sent a bunch of poems out someplace, to a whole bunch of publishers, and they all got rejected. And I just thought this is insane, Um, I don't like rejection. I don't
But you
have.
kept going. That's the theme, right? You sent out 40 and then you kept writing and you sent more stuff out and then you got published and you sent out more and it
Yeah,
got rejected.
yeah, yeah,
And that's like the life of anyone in the arts, right? Rejection.
yeah.
And especially if you're a child who is in the healing process from childhood abuse, rejection's a weird thing for
Oh
us,
yeah,
right?
oh yeah, yeah. So I
It
just
doesn't hit the same.
it, yeah. It it's awful. It's a big trigger, but I didn't let it stop me from writing, and that's a good thing. I let it stop me from sending my stuff out. But I also discovered that I couldn't write fiction, because I tried instead writing some fiction, and all I had was my life, and you can't, if you want to be a writer, you can't make a living if all you have is your life to write about, I don't think, it helps if you can write fiction because then you can write, 30, 40 books, right? And have a hope of earning a living. So I got on with my life, but I kept on writing whenever, because I kept a journal. I do keep a journal. So I would just find that I was journaling about something over and over and over again, expanding it, developing it, digging deeper into something through my journal, and then I would say, well, I want to put this together into an essay, and so I would. So there are essays about like buying my first condo, buying my first house. Mm,
So you were blogging before blogging was even a thing, but you were just doing it to yourself,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you were cool. You were country before it was cool.
But and I've heard this about other writers. I love the implements of writing. I love paper and pens. I have three fountain pens, and I love scribbling away on paper with a pen. And then I got a typewriter, when I was like 19 or something, and it was one of those really really old tall typewriters that was not even electric, and you had to bang down on the keys.
I was just going to ask if it was electric.
No, it wasn't. I think it was an old Underwood, if that's what they were called. And and I loved that. I loved typing, and then I worked my way, over the decades through manual typewriters to electric typewriters to portable typewriters to word processors to computers.
I just love that there was something just soothing about my grandpa had an electric typewriter and they were huge. Remember that? They were
So,
huge and
yeah, yeah,
heavy.
yeah,
And when you would hit a button, you'd almost could feel the vibration through your finger in a
yeah.
way. And I just always thought, for some reason, that was always just like just playing around on a typewriter was one of those things that would settle my brain down just from the physical typing
Oh,
itself.
really? Yeah, I don't mind the sound of typing at all.
Me either. We should be working in a newsroom somewhere together, Felicia, right? Because we're the only ones. Except now it probably sounds different because I think keyboards are quieter and stuff. So let's talk. We're going to come back to the writing in your life here in a second, but let's talk a little bit about the book. Let's start with the title, and if you want to give us just a synopsis of the book, of what it's about, and where you got the title, a little bit of God.
Um, this I can read the synopsis off the back of the book if you don't mind. I've done so many different versions
I'm never going to
of.
tell you not to read, Felicia. I love you reading.
Okay, this is what I wrote for the blurb on the back cover. Okay, A Little Bit of God is a memoir that spans 400 years. As the author, that would be me, tracks the origins of her life story to the birth of the European Age of Reason. She was born to immigrants from the Netherlands shortly after World War II. They were traumatized by their own histories there and in the Dutch colony of Indonesia. After years of wondering what was wrong with her, the author, me again, begins to remember a childhood of sexual violence inflicted on her by her father and others, while her mother worked hard to be oblivious. In fragmented narratives written over a 30-year period, the author reveals her lifelong journey of remembering, healing, and discovering both who she is and what humanity is. Now, I should add, and I added this to the blurb that I wrote on the Amazon website. There's a lot of discussion about belief. What is belief and the difference between knowing and believing? And so that includes belief in religion. This book may be called A Little Bit of God, but I am not advocating any kind of religion. There's spirit and the needs of the spirit, whatever they are, or whatever people may feel those needs to be. But I'm not an advocate of any religion. My parents, my mother in particular, called themselves Christian, and look where that got us. So there is some discussion about belief in there and the nature of evil and coming to terms with evil. A Little Bit of God was at first the title of one small section. It was sort of a poem. And let me just see if I can find that.
While you're looking for that, what was the before we get into you reading? What was the time between you saying, "Okay, I'm going to publish this," and us sitting here now? How long did it take you to get to from the spark, I'm self-publishing, to now it's published? And congratulations, by the way. Congratulations on saying I'm going to publish my own book and doing it.
Well, I I had not, I didn't know, over the last 20 years, I didn't know. I was, as I said, keeping a journal, sometimes putting stuff from my journals together into making an essay, not sending it out anywhere. And I didn't know if I ever would or if I would ever compile them. And then my mother died. That was about 18 months ago. It was in December of 2023. And I flew over across the country to where she was in the hospital and was with her for the last 10 days of her life. And then I wrote about that. And what I was writing, I recognized as being the conclusion. This was the conclusion to my whole story of how childhood abuse affected my life and how I have had to deal with the residue and the scars and the damage and the wounds of all of that. Um,
It
so,
kind of goes back to that, we hear this all the time. Why didn't you speak up sooner? Why didn't you say anything? And it's like there's this disconnect where people who haven't been through it don't understand that it can be decades before you can no longer repress and act like you're functioning normally.
well, yeah, I knew in my early 20s, when I left home finally and flew the coop, and I had my first occupation. I had a job as a journalist when I was 19 and 20 and 21. And I couldn't handle it. You know, like I was supposed to be what do they call it now? Launching, right? Launching. I was supposed to be launching, and at
Is
that
that what they call it now? I'm so out of the loop. I don't even know
yeah,
what they call it now.
launching when you finish school, when you finished university, and you're ready to become an adult. You know, enter the adult world. And at that time in the 70s, people that I knew were launching because there were a lot of jobs available. So people were finishing university and getting jobs in areas that interested them. And I got jobs in journalism. But I was scared witless and I was having massive headaches and I just couldn't handle it. And I hit the nadir of my life, the low point of my life, I think when I was 25. And and then I told myself, that's when I came out to Vancouver, and I told myself, Felicia, you have to grow up. But I knew that there was something, you know, there was something the matter with me, really, because why couldn't I do what everybody else was doing? I just couldn't.
It's a it's a hard thing, and it's whatever age you are, when you can turn and face that, right? And say, okay, you are why I can't do this, or when you have to turn it, because that by facing it, and in your case, writing about it, it takes away some of that shadow. The shadow's never going to go away. We can't the only way the shadow would ever go away is if it didn't happen to us. But by facing it, it kind of, in a way, I think, turns the tables a little bit, and gives us back part of our soul without the shadow, in a way, if that makes sense.
It's when you recognize where your damage comes from, and that it's not your fault. I mean, this is the big thing, you know, coming to recognize that it's not your fault. That's huge because people who have suffered any sort of parental or familial abuse or neglect, they believe it's their own fault. Children think everything is their fault, you know. They don't have a proper recognition of the difference between themselves and the adults around them. They don't aren't aware of boundaries yet. So they make everything about them. It's all their fault. And so you have to go through life blaming yourself, shaming yourself, hating yourself. And maybe you don't know why, you know? But those things are you you can hardly live any sort of a life if you're really, really burdened with shame, self shame, and self hatred.
Wonderfully put. I think this is a good time for you to read your first passage, or your
Okay.
poem, the poem, if you found a poem.
Well, I found the little essay that begins with a poem that is called "A Little Bit of God."
Yes, please.
I don't. Okay, I'll read a little bit of it. Okay, I don't want to read the whole part of it, but this is an essay called "A Little Bit of God." 3 years of tears to drain away the pain inflicted by two charred sticks, by two blackened souls acting out their rage. He killing love wherever he spotted it, she shutting it out. Where was the room for a child in that fire pit? Not even a weed could have stayed green there. I was born and raised in a strict Christian household, although I never heard anyone say the words God or Jesus. I know it was Christian because we prayed before and after meals and had to go to church on Sundays, even if we were away on vacation. For years, there was also Bible reading after supper. My father would read chapter by chapter from Genesis 1 to the end of Revelations. I don't know how many times we got through it. He read everything in a monotone, and if we were in Chronicles, he read all the begats, just as he read later the Sermon on the Mount. I was born and raised in a repressed, restricted household, and I equated those qualities with Christianity. I saw my mother shake Christianity out like a clean sheet over a foaming river of rocks and rapids. Under its taut and unblemished surface, she didn't have to see her child being dashed against those rocks. That's all I'll read from that section, okay?
Wow. Wow. The imagery in that. Can we talk a little bit about it? Can we talk
Okay.
about the sticks
Yeah.
and the burnt sticks and that where you came up with that imagery?
Yep. Oh, yeah. You'd like me to talk about it. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
the two charred sticks are my parents.
Yep.
Burnt sticks, blackened souls acting out their rage.
What a description. I mean, it really gets to the point. And when you said no, not even a weed could grow here,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was, I mean, that I find that that is, it shows that like there was no hope before you even existed.
That's right. That's right. And I have worked through a lot of anger, and I would say this is an angry poem, you know? Really calling it like it is. They're two charred sticks, they're two blackened souls. You know, they've got rage. He kills love, she shuts it out. And the home was a fire pit. You know, not even a weed could have grown there. That's an angry poem. And anger, anger, releasing anger is so healing. You know, it's the necessary engine to overcome crap. All the crap, all the shame, all the blame that you place on yourself. The way to get rid of it is to use the anger, the outrage that you are entitled to, that you would have if you discovered some other child was being harmed like this. You would be angry. So, and they were, you know, there's forgiveness in this book. There's acceptance. The, but in its own time, you know. I don't believe in letting people off the hook. I mean, and especially with our mothers, you know, I think a lot of people are inclined to want to forgive their mother before they've acknowledged what their mother did and named it and gotten angry about it, you know? And you have to name it, you have to face it, you have to get angry about it, you have to accept it. And then you can start to see how your mother was herself a product of misogyny, a product of a horrible patriarchal culture, a product of war in my mother's case. Um, uh, you know, and these were all factors going into why she couldn't be a warm and lovable and protective mother.
I think there's this natural instinct that even in the taboo subject of talking about it was men in your family, there would be society would be quicker to believe you. It's almost like we have to present evidence of why our mothers weren't good, right? It's like this instant, well, she was a mother, there's no way. It's like I think that we were more likely to believed when we were talking about the men involved in our abuse, and it's harder to explain our mothers. And I still to this day go through this where it's like, but why did you have contact? Because she was my abuser. And I continued to be, I went from that to being in an abusive relationship with a guy that I went back to who was abusive to me. It's a
Yeah.
lifelong cycle. So it's like, but it's like an uphill battle, like slogging through tar to explain that sometimes women are broken this way too.
Yes. Well, uh, I think that in a patriarchal culture where the family is expected to be composed of a head of the family, the father, and the secondary person who will, you know, follow the father's orders and make sure the kids follow the father's orders. You're going to end up with a lot of damaged children because power corrupts. And what you're doing, this sort of family that we're supposed to have, that Christianity has insisted um, that we have, where the man is in charge and the wife is subservient. You've got power, and power corrupts. It
Felicia,
just
just real quick for our audience, so you were a single child, correct?
no. I had two siblings,
Ah, see, we're girls, boys, both.
older sister, younger brother. We were all 2 years apart,
How was the dynamic for the three of you?
and not great.
Good,
Not
bad?
no, not great.
Yeah,
No.
because that's shadows there, right? Like there, I have a disconnect from my sisters in a way because that was a part of me that I never showed them or shared with them. So I don't feel like my sister even really knows me. So not to take us off on the sibling thing, I just wanted, some clarity for everyone in this space. Um so you said about for you went home and when your mother passed, you said you believe in people being held accountable, but you have to move on. What to you, do you think there's forgiveness there for her? Or is it something, is it a forgiveness because it's for your healing process, or is it because for her?
Oh, forgiveness is for yourself. It's always for yourself because um, it's a way of lightening the load. You know, and it's really forgiveness of yourself as well as forgiveness for the other person because of the blame that you carry for what other people do to you. But I just want to say that I had no contact with any of my family for 20 or 25 years. I live 3,000 miles away from them. And when I confronted them, I sent letters to every member of my family when I felt ready, um, telling them what I knew about my father's abuse, about my mother's failure to protect. And I sent letters to my siblings as well, just to let them know. And after a little bit of really odd back and forth with my mother, that was the end of it. I didn't see them for 20, 25 years. And eventually, my mother told me that she believed me. And
Was that
that
an
was,
extra weight? Did you feel like that was a huge weight for you?
oh, yeah. There was, I'd had a lot of therapy, as much of it dealing with my mother's failure to protect, which I might also call neglect. Her refusing to see or to hear what she should have seen and what she should have heard. And that was as harmful, as destructive to me as what my father and the gangs of people that he associated with did. And so I had done a lot of therapy, trying to come to terms with my mother's failures, and I was okay. I was okay. But when she said she believed me, that was something that no amount of therapy could have the same result, have the same effect from that. That was huge. But it didn't make our relationship suddenly all that much better. We then started having contact, phone contact regularly. But
Did she ever explain to you why she had that shift? Or do you think she just
I
never had
asked
the
her what
courage?
I asked her, why she believed me now, and she didn't tell me anything terribly convincing, you know. Um, I mean, there were things that she could have said, but she was still absolving herself entirely, She did not say anything about her failures or what she did. Although she said, now I have to live with this guilt for the rest of my life. But after that, I never really saw any guilt from her. It was, um,
Ugh. Mm. So you knew the words were good, but it would have been better if you actually saw it in action, basically.
yeah. And if she could talk more, but everybody in my family, as in abusive families, everything stays under the surface.
Yeah, it's I think for abuse victims, we spend so long internalizing everything and being structured to keep, because of that, the protection of the abuse or whatever, that when someone finally hears us, we never want to stop talking, right? We want to
Yeah.
tell our story, and that comes at different points for people in different points in their life. But once we start talking, then we have no desire to go back to where we're, because it's a very solitary life, even if you have people around you. It's a very solitary life when you're a victim of childhood abuse, because your instinct is naturally not be you don't trust people instantly. It's social situations are weird. I mean, it's so, yeah.
Well, in the case of child abuse, both within the family and when neighbors get together and share their children, which they do far too often, they are also invested in making sure that the children don't talk. So they will do things to persuade the children that nobody will care, nobody will listen to them, people will call them liars, you know? So they teach children not to have any faith in the rest of the community.
Sad. Are you ready to read another passage for us? Because I think we are
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah. Um, this is from near the beginning. And so I've chosen a few passages from nearer the beginning and nearer the end, right? So closer to the immediacy of the healing process and then farther away. This is called the beginning of the end. A woman is lying on a high, narrow bed in a hospital. She's been in a vegetative state for 40 years. During all that time, her husband has been visiting her every weekend. He's about to make his last visit. The woman knows this. She is much more conscious than people think. In fact, she's totally conscious. She has also regained the use of her right arm and is holding a knife under the bedclothes. With hatred and fury, she waits for her husband to enter the darkened room, to bend over her, to kiss her. Then she will plunge the blade into his heart. This is a synopsis of a short story I wrote in 1972 when I was 18. I didn't know then who the woman was. I didn't know who I was. Now I know she was me, or at least a vision of me. This story is like a little fragment of knowledge of myself that had broken loose from the depths where it was all stored and floated to the surface. I had to wait so many years to know the rest. September 1991. I bought airline tickets for a Christmas visit to my family. I dreamt one night of my father lying on top of me. I told someone over tea that I had often in my life experienced the presence of a black cloud above me when I was in bed at night. It would hover over me and then sink until it weighed down on top of me. Because it seemed this was the first time I had ever thought of this. The first time that I was conscious of being conscious of a heavy black cloud. Still, the word was correct. I had often had that experience. I say these things as if there was some significance to these little events. In fact, I dismissed them as soon as they had occurred. I forgot the conversation of the cloud. Later, I was reminded of it, but I couldn't remember ever having said those things, and couldn't imagine why I would have. November. Looking for a way to fill in some spare time, I came across a little book called Focusing, written by a psychologist, that described a technique for getting in touch with feelings. Feelings are called feelings, I read, because we can feel them physically. Emotion and sensation combine into what we call feeling. It makes sense then that if we focus our attention on a particular physical sensation, the emotion attached to that sensation might rise to the surface. I tried it, stretching out on my couch, expecting to explore the tension in my shoulders. But I found instead a long forgotten tension in my buttocks and thighs, demanding my attention. When I concentrated there, something came toward me in the darkness behind my closed eyelids. It looked like a large gargoyle, a deformed face, a gothic monster. It glided from the right, beyond my feet, to the left, and approached my head. I replayed this several times in my mind. The clearest details were a triangular black mouth and a large red tongue hanging out of the right side. I focused every day for 4 days, each time getting strange images, bodily sensations, and emotions. Then, in a flash of insight, I knew this was not a face, but a groin, and I knew that it belonged to my father and that he had been doing sexual things to me. When I called a friend to ask for advice, my composure was suddenly torn apart by the uncontrollable weeping of someone inside me, some small person who was using my mouth to cry out of. It seemed that she'd been keeping this secret for aeons and was terrified of the consequences of telling. For the next 3 hours, a little girl expressed herself through my body as I shook and trembled and wept. I canceled my plane tickets and sent my parents a terse note. Something had come up. I was not well, I said.
Wow. So, wow. I remember reading this passage, and inflation knows this. We've discussed that I had to read her book in sections because you know I have childhood trauma and stuff. But it was like one of the first times that I saw someone writing down descriptively what the sensations and the feelings around focusing on that time. When you were focusing, what age were you when did it range, or was it all during a certain time period?
When I began this practice of focusing, um,
No, that when you focused, what age were you in the focus?
oh, um, 5 or 6.
Ugh, it's horrible.
Yeah,
So when you wrote this, because you wrote about having that conversation with someone about it, and that you broke down for hours.
yeah.
How was that conversation? Was it an embraceful one? And or because like I feel sometimes it's exhausting to talk about this stuff. Usually when I talk about it, I have to like lay low on X and just regroup because it just sucks. It's such an evil thing. It sucks all the energy from your cells in a way when you're talking about it. Did you feel that like I know I have women in my life now that if I'm having something like that happen, I can reach out to them and they'll just listen and stuff. That conversation, because you wrote about it, must have not only what happened in the conversation, but it left a mark on you as well with your friend that you called, correct?
Well, it was a woman who I didn't know very well. Um, she the apartment building that I was living in, she had started visiting someone there. And so I had seen her, a fair number of times, and we'd had some conversations. And I knew that she had been abused as a child. And so I told her this. And it was an odd situation because she had the experience, but we were not particularly close or intimate. So she was just sort of supportive and advised me to call a therapist. Because you know, this happened just because I was getting in touch with my feelings. People like to talk about therapists brainwashing people into believing all sorts of stuff that's not true. And I expect that that's often bullshit. Um, but I know that in my case, I began having these memories all on my own with no support, knowing virtually nothing about the epidemic of child abuse that was being opened up now, at that time in the late 80s and early 90s. I
Well,
just had,
because did you guys, we had a thing here in the 80s where America got insane
yeah,
and thought
yeah,
every daycare was a devil
yeah,
worshiping,
yeah,
abusing thing.
yeah.
Did you guys have anything similar to that up in Canada during that time or no?
No, but um, we did hear about it up here. And I mean, there was a massive, massive attempt by fathers like mine who were engaging in mass child abuse with other men and with some of their wives as well. These child abuse gangs are very mixed sex. And when the daughters, grown up daughters, started realizing what had happened to them, started remembering, recovering their memories, these abusers went nuts. I mean, they had everything to lose, and they did everything that they could to make the world believe that their children were nuts, certifiable, should be sent to psychiatric hospitals and locked up. They got some psychiatrist, a corrupt psychiatrist, to write a book called False Memory Syndrome, which has now been debunked. I mean, they worked hard, and there are a lot of people who still believe that it's all made up, and it's not made up. The whole
Do you think the conscious of Canada overall has moved away from discounting childhood abuse, or do you think the crap we're dealing with now is muddying the waters and that's no longer a priority?
well, Um, I think it's generally accepted now, that a certain number of children are sexually violated and abused and tormented by their fathers or uncles or older brothers or, next door neighbor men. There are a couple. There are a couple of women in Canada who are working in this area. They've written a book called Non-State Torture, which is how they now refer to these gang crimes against children. Domestic. Non-state means domestic, families, neighbors. And they've been working to get it outlawed. They've succeeded in getting it outlawed at the UN, but not in Canada. You'd think that there would be a law against gang rape of children. There isn't, um, despite the fact that it is far more comprehensive in its damage than simple sexual assault, and that's about all that you can charge a father with who rapes his daughter, sexual assault. Um, so there's an understanding, and there's an understanding, much more greater understanding now of dissociation as a means of protection, which allows a child to forget, to take the memories of what just happened to her and shove them to a corner, a cupboard corner of her mind, and shut the door. And that's an element of dissociation. So there's a much greater understanding now of how that works. And but still, people care. I would have to say people care as little about it now as they ever cared about it. The abuse of children is just, it goes on and on and on. And I was already an adult when the Canadian government decided to make possession of child pornography illegal. That was sometime in the 80s, I think, possibly in the 70s. Now, if you consider that photographs and videos and film of child abuse is evidence of the abuse and should be used in a court of law, the idea that it was not illegal is insane, just insane. And I remember the stories when the police started confiscating this stuff, and the police had to watch hours and hours of this. And there were stories about police just breaking down and crying and throwing up at what they had to see. And now there's the dark web, and I don't know. I've read, occasional articles about what goes on in the dark web in terms of live streaming of child abuse on demand. Um, and yet,
I saw a report a couple months ago from the Center for Missing and Abused Children saying they get hundreds and thousands of tips and videos a month, and they have like over 4 million or something, and only maybe 10,000 of those go to prosecution.
right, yeah, we, and it's just, it's just not. I don't know. It's just evidence that we live in a society that was built by men for men, and nobody else really matters quite as much. And there's way too many men who are just into sexual depravity, and how many people are studying why? Is it necessary? Is that part of the male psyche? Does it go along with testosterone? I don't believe those things. I think it's part of male conditioning, masculine conditioning. But it goes on. I mean, so abuse of all sorts goes on and on and on. And is it even, there's so much of it, is it even possible to stop it?
Well, I think the way I mean, I hope so. I mean, I hope eventually it one of the things that is hardest for me is realizing that no one is I think we've gone back to a time where no one is listening to kids who say they're abused or give the signs of it. We can't see the red flags we used to be able to see, in schools and stuff. It used to be able teachers could see a child was being abused and they would go report it. Now
Yep.
we have teachers in there that are activists, and they're teaching these little kids about butt plugs and stuff. So who are these kids supposed to turn to? Right? I
Well,
hate that. It
exactly.
drives me crazy.
This is a progression. This is a progression, I think, of the child abuse, pedophilia, movements that have been struggling to grow for decades. Um, and grooming a child. First, you groom the parents. That's what abusers know. You befriend the parents. You tell the parents everything is fine. The parents then let you have access to the kids, and the kids can't complain to their parents if something happens because the parents are friends with the abuser. And now they're doing it in schools. They've groomed the teachers.
Yeah, school used to be the one place that you had a little bit of peace. I couldn't imagine being in school now. No, I just couldn't. Like all I it would overload me. I would have to not be in school. I just couldn't take all of that the sexualization of all around me. I just couldn't. So, why don't we get
School
to
was my
another.
safe place.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
It was the only place that like I love the smell of the books in the library, right?
Right,
That's
yeah,
a
yeah.
memory that brings back I may not read a lot now because of my eyes, but I used to go take a empty bag to the library, shout out Carol. I would take my empty bag to the library and fill it up. And this was not but 10 years ago with books. I would just load up with books. And it's like the smell of a library for a long time for me was a safe space.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's get to another one of your passages that you were going to read for us today.
Okay. This one's a little farther along in the book. It's called The Problem of Voice. It's hard for me to write about myself, since every voice I try has the ring of untruth about it. Imposter. Where does that voice come from? Stop showing off. Stop acting and posing. You're just over dramatizing. And from deep, deep down, underneath all the rest, you're nothing but a worthless piece of shit. The familiarity of this condemnation gives me the clue. These are old, old voices, the ones that remind me of colored electric signs flashing still in the rubble of old and new that is me. A long, long time ago, I kept a diary in the manner I thought of diarists. Note the flippancy, self deprecating humor. Don't take me too seriously. It recorded the time when university was finished, my first career already in ruins, and the brief sense I had of hopefulness about the future, of being able to be free, of being able to make something of my life, curiously evaporated. I easily dismissed the diary as more fiction than fact. It was a place where I could dramatize my life, which meant express my feelings while cynically denying them any validity. It was a journal of sarcasm, and I suppose now I used it to develop a persona of self disparagement. What else can you do when your feelings are all true, but the circumstances that seem to provoke them just don't line up? And what else can you do when you look out your eyes at the world and see only ashes? Later, when I adopted a spiritual orientation to life, I started to write a diary again. This time it was to record my spiritual progress and the difficulties in the way. I found myself writing in the tiniest hand possible, in the briefest terms possible. I was trying to be honest, and honesty did not permit many words. Not enough for that voice to condemn. Making entries was something like staying on the phone for too short a time to permit a trace. I was hiding from some part of myself that, I now realize, wouldn't have given me the space to improve myself. It wouldn't have allowed me that degree, small though it was, of self assertion. It wouldn't have allowed me to take myself seriously. Yet I am a writer. It is my first vocation. I have created voices to suit many occasions, to tell many stories. But when I try simply to tell my story, there's a sense of alienation. I listen to myself as from afar, which makes me wonder, what strange offspring is this that seems to have no relationship to me? I watch myself in the act of writing, and the act of watching, no, the state of being watched, makes me feel guilty. In the act of writing my story, I seem to have no choice but to watch myself, and in watching, to condemn. Every voice seems like a mask, hiding something. Every tone seems like artifice. Believing the voice of my condemner, I wonder what I'm covering up. I look at what I've written. It seems so terribly over earnest, like a chronic liar at last telling the truth, pushing the truth on an audience that only knows her as a liar. Do I have any hope of making her, me, believe me? I recognize that I'm trying to express myself without the protection of persona. I need to find a voice that seems genuine. I need to listen to myself and hear the ring of truth. To do that, I need to stay inside myself, to locate myself within my own center, to hear the reverberations of my voice as if from within a bell tower. Not to be a listener from a distance, like, say, an atheist for whom the sound of bells provokes cynical disdain. I'm trying to believe in myself. I'm trying to believe there is a self to be believed in, one self, a core self, to whom all the fragments are related, from whom all the fragments radiate. It's not a voice I need, but an ear that is willing to listen and believe. Liar! My mother hisses at me when I stand before her in the kitchen and tell her my father has been hurting me. My mother cannot afford to believe. She cannot believe in my honesty, in my pain, in my innocence. She created a world of lies for me to occupy, in which the greatest lie, apparently, was me. My love for her was dismissed as not love. My desire to be obedient dismissed as willful disobedience. My innocence dismissed as feigned. My pain dismissed as pleasure. How could I have been so wrong about myself? I do not believe that I was wrong. It is time for the child to stop feeling guilty.
The imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
Wow, man, it's I feel like it's the first thing that gets strong in our little minds as kids in this situation, right?
yeah,
Because that's been programmed by the abusers. They're working on making us doubt ourselves from the moment we remember our first memory.
yeah,
So, like, the biggest battle I think a lot of us have is with that imposter syndrome.
yep. Well, you know, and isn't that similar to the effects of gaslighting, right? You come to believe you're crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. How did you feel like when you wrote that and you read it back? If you can kind of do a little time travel, the first time you wrote that and read it back to yourself, what did you, I mean, did you see that? I mean, by writing that, you were giving voice to the fact that you were fighting against that imposter voice,
Yeah,
right? So,
yeah.
how did that make you feel?
Well, the last line there is like the shift, you know, because this whole process of finding what the problem is, confronting the problem, naming the problem, experiencing the problem it led me again and again and again to a little shift, you know, a little shift away from that, from the old programming, and a little shift towards something better. So the last line there, I don't believe I've lost the page, but the last line, the last line was, I don't believe that the child was wrong, right? That's the little shift, you know, and it's how healing happens, a little shift at a time.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And there's like I've talked a lot with other women about grief and that there's no mold for grief or you can't say everyone follows the same timeline. I think it's you know it should just be obvious that that's the same thing with healing from childhood trauma, right? There everyone has their own roadmap in their time of healing and they're going to go through it differently, but we all have to fight our one of our all of us, no matter the circumstances, have to have that battle with that shadow that is the loudest voice for a long time. And now mine is a much smaller voice. Does it still show up? Heck yes, it shows
Yeah.
up. But the other version, my inner warrior, Pija, air quotations, usually smacks that voice down these days.
Yep. That's great. That's great. And I might say though, maybe the warrior Pija might embrace that child with that voice instead of smacking her down, you know,
No, no, no. I
embrace.
have embraced her. That's what my art series was. I meant that voice that was not my own, that was in
Uh-huh.
my head, that was
Right.
telling me that I wasn't good enough. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I love little Pija now. Trust me.
Yeah. It's all programming, you know, and it's useful. It was useful to me. It might be useful to other people to consider how computers are programmed, you know, because that's how our minds are programmed. And deprogramming. We all know about the importance of deprogramming, right? We found it when teenagers were I think also in the 70s there was a time when teenagers were joining these strange Hare Krishna cults, for example. Things out of the Moonies, you know,
The
strange.
movies.
Yeah, strange cults. And finally some people figured out how to deprogram them, that they had to actually be deprogrammed, you know?
I think that's what we're missing today. That was something they had back then when we went through that phase of everybody's kid was in a cult. They had professional deprogrammers, and we don't have that now, right?
Yeah.
For this whole what is going on with our younger people now. We don't have guys, they're like, no, 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 I got this. Because the guys who would normally be saying that are also on the side that says, oh, no, you can change sex, right? So we don't have that weapon against us like they had in the 70s.
Well, no, you know, society as a whole was not pushing the Moonies on everybody, you know, or the
True.
Hare Krishna sect, right? This cult programming has overtaken most of the bloody world, most of the bloody Western world. I mean, the intelligentsia, the academics, the professors, the professional classes. It There's got to be a sort of mass deprogramming that happens.
Yeah, we're gonna need an antidote for that Kool-Aid, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're now into our so let's go on to your next piece. Do you want to read some one of your healing pieces for us? Or did you have another piece that you wanted to read from when you were younger? Whatever you want to do.
Well, from later in the book,
Yes.
um, I'm saving the most joyful piece for last. Okay, so we're not ready for the most joyful piece yet. But I will read something called People of the Book. When I open the pages of a book, I open the doors of a prison, not to release any prisoners, but to join them. That's how it feels to me. That is not how it's supposed to feel. I mull this over as I fill pots from a bag of dirt on my balcony. The century is about to turn. My decade of therapy is over, at least temporarily, and I've just moved into the first apartment I've ever owned. Although the penny I drop on the floor rolls eastward to reveal the settling of time, everything seems brand new to me. The balcony, like every room inside, seems a blank, if tilted, page, waiting for my words. I try to command life. Let this earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, I say. And, what do you know? Geraniums and petunias take root and multiply, while winged warblers and finches perch on tree branches beyond the balcony rail. Fiction seemed an escape for me as a child. I could open the covers of a book then and enter another world. But no matter how wide that world was, the last page always came. For a few days I could pretend to live there, but then I would be expelled. The book would close its covers against me, and I would see that it was a tiny world penned in by borders. I would try to take what I could. I would study the people. I would study how they reacted to disappointment and what methods they used to survive. I was always looking for normal. I began my search for a self I could be with fairy tales. A mobile library came weekly to the school I attended in grade 5. Inside, I discovered fairy tale books in every color of the rainbow. I read one color each week and looked for role models among cats and goats, rich children and poor ones, princesses and dwarves. I stopped reading stories when I was 28 and holder of a master's degree in English literature. Though I had studied innumerable characters, I had failed to find myself in any book. I think I'll skip a few paragraphs and then take up. When I open a book, I want to reach into the pages and draw out the characters. Open a doorway so that they might fly away from those who dare to own them. To live is not to be written. When I open the pages of a book, I look as into a mirror. My life too was scripted before I was born. I too was destined to serve another's purpose. The pain that I might suffer was disregarded in the calculated process of transforming a person into a set of roles. That's enough of that.
Let's talk about it then. Let's. Everything that you read, I'm like, okay, I identify with that. I identify with that. Definitely identify with that. The people watching, the mimicking of how people emotionally reacted, it becomes second nature to us.
Well, yeah. I mean, you try to act like normal people, right? I mean, how to be genuine, how to authentically behave, like in the spur of the moment, have do things. I wouldn't have. I could not possibly have done that. It was all like, okay, how should I behave? How do people behave? And trying to mimic and imitate that.
Yes, because then because at the other side of that coin is like we don't like change, right? Routine becomes very because if everything's routine, there's less chance of something bad happening, right? If we
Oh
can't
yeah,
control
yeah,
a lot,
right.
so you just stay in your lane and you're quiet and you try and be invisible.
And that sticking to routines, creating routines, that's rigid, right? It's very easy to become a rigid person because
Yeah, absolutely.
spontaneity is out of the question.
Yes, no, because we didn't know what that was,
That's right.
right? Everything had to be planned because there was planning behind warping us as children.
Hmm.
They may not have written it down, but the moment that they decided that was even an option, there was a plan put in place. So yeah, there's no concept of spontaneity and or anything like that. Can you think of but sometimes we would try, like, I think the few times that I tried to be good in social situations, it was just an awkward, right? Because for me too, I don't sometimes I don't I'm not really good with a lot of the emotions because they were repressed for so long. So as I deal with them, like, if I never know sometimes what that one thing is that's going to make me act like a 5-year-old, right?
Right,
That like when I'm angry or if I'm really sad or whatever, it's like, and you can't control that little one, right? Because she was never allowed to be a little one in a way. So sometimes you act juvenile, for me anyways, like it's a juvenile response because those emotions were stunted when I was a juvenile.
right. Um, and I think my mind has just gone blank. So,
Well, like, like for you, since we're people watchers and we wanted, did you, as you got older, kind of drift away from, like, were you more solitary?
yeah, and I've never ever been able to engage in superficial chit chat. And that's what I wanted to say. You know, pe- for some children who've been abused, they become very, very serious, somber people, you know? And I mean, to just socialize with people by having the basic social grease kind of conversations, you know, I couldn't do them. I couldn't. And so I was socially really, really awkward. And, you know, I think people would approach me, try and have a little bit of a superficial chat, like, you know, oh, I like your haircut, you know, or where did you get those shoes? You know, this is the basic social grease, right? And my responses would be so strange, probably, that they would all drift away, you know, or I wouldn't know what to say. Or I would try and talk, if they said they liked my shoes, I might try and talk about the history of shoe manufacture in Germany or something. something something with weight to it, you know, something serious.
Well, in a way that keeps people at bay, right? And that's our ultimate goal, is whether we mean to or not, subconsciously keeping people at arm's length because then they're not in our bubble,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh. And they're not a threat.
Yes.
And they weren't going to help anyway, so, you know, yeah,
I
that
love that. I can just see you standing there explaining the history of shoe manufacturing in Germany. And they're like, well, I gotta go. It's time to go get a Starbucks. Okay, so uh I just really identify with that, with the whole people watching and you're just mimicking. I used to refer to myself as a chameleon,
right.
right? And it's why I did really good in the corporate world because I was already disassociating. I didn't know what that was back then. And I would just go in and I would, it's why it's really good with like working with clients and stuff in the company I work for, because I could instantly figure out their tone. I could figure out if they wanted someone who was more quiet or if they were more serious or if they were cut up. It was an unplanned side of byproduct in a way of that solitary bubble that I put around myself and the people watching.
Well, you know, that is something worth investigating more, how the damage caused can inadvertently be a plus, be a benefit, you know, be something that you can use. It's like you've broken your leg and so you have to walk with a cane, but then the cane becomes a thing that you can use for multiple things. And maybe that's part of the compensation, you know, that
I
life
yeah,
offers.
I think we can spot insincerity. I think
Yeah,
we can spot the bullshit. I think that's why there's a lot of women in this movement that have similar backgrounds, because once you decide you're not going to be quiet or keep secrets or lie anymore, there's no way you're getting me to lie that humans can change sex
yeah,
and that gender is real, right? It's like I spent my whole life lying. It's like there's certain people in my life I don't associate with because they were in my life when my biological mother was still alive, and I don't know how to tell them, well, she was actually a monster.
yeah, yeah.
And I don't want to have to explain that because it's gonna be on me to explain it. She's dead. And I'm going to have to like do like a PowerPoint presentation on how bad she was. And that's something that shouldn't be the way it is, but I know it is. So instead I just ghosted them. I don't know how else to put it because I didn't have the emotions to be able to do that and explain to them, look, please stop talking to me about her,
Right.
or kind of thing. There was a woman when I was a freshman in college, and she was my friend for decades. And when this all exploded out of my head about 10 years ago, like, we were already drifting apart, but like especially during COVID when we were in lockdowns and I wasn't able to go in the office and I had nowhere to run from the memories, getting messages about what would she think about this and all that stuff would just make it just was fueling the fire. So I just had to, for self-preservation, distance myself from pretty much the majority of the people that knew her.
Well, I still believe I could only heal because I moved 3,000 miles away from my family. You know,
Yeah.
I don't think I could have done it if I was in proximity.
Yeah, they're all back east,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm sure that played a role in my decision to move to the West Coast. Okay, so let's go on to another passage.
Okay, so this is the most joyful one. It's called Muslim in Shiraz. Oh, there are a few footnotes to this one, so I need to make a few brief exclamations. This Shiraz is a city in Iran. Um, there is a car manufacturing industry in Iran. They make two kinds of cars, or they did at that time. One kind of car was called a Pecan, and the other was called the Pride. Pride, as in, Pride season. I don't know why they called it Pride, but they only came in white, no colors. And I think we all know at this point what hijab means. In Iran, it might mean a chador. Women out in the country might wear that, one long piece of clothing that covers their head down to their ankles and they hold it under their chin. That's a chador. And city women, though, might just wear a long overcoat and they're getting shorter every year. But that's called a manteau, with the French word for coat, manteau, and a kerchief. Um, and I don't know if anybody has heard of Hafez. He's a Sufi poet, and he's the Iranian Sufi poet. People revere him. Almost every household has a copy of the poetry of Hafez. Okay, and I changed the name of the most important woman in this story to Layla, which is a very common Iranian name. When I joined my lover Layla in Iran that hot July, I thought of the next 3 weeks as our honeymoon. It had been a slow process of wading through obstacles, mostly in my own mind. But by April, I was in love. And when Layla packed up for her annual trip home, she invited me to break up her summer and mine with a visit. During the first week, the furtive kisses deep in the closet of her mother's home were daring and exhilarating. The only time we had alone, we chased pecans and ghostly prides. all engorged with families in Tehran's midnight rush. We were two women in hijab, manteaus to our ankles, kerchiefs tied under our chins, fingers interlaced by the gear shift, while a hot wind blew by the opened windows, and the Commodores shouted from the tape deck, "I want to marry you and take you home." It was our song. Well, it was our song to me, Layla looking puzzled whenever I told her. I knew something was wrong. The lyrics, at first I thought it was just infatuation, but now it's lasted so long, snagged something deep inside me. If I counted from the first night in my apartment with Layla, the night I invited her over when all the living room furniture had been moved out so the floor could be replaced, and the only thing left was the bed, our relationship was 3 months old. And Layla had been back in Iran for 2 of those months. But I thought, in a year or two, the lyrics will be right, so it's all okay. I was optimistic. My heart was hers. We crisscrossed Tehran like pirates, like young girls who've just discovered adult pleasure, like children mooning the mullahs. That's how it felt to me. I had no way of knowing that for a woman like Layla, enmeshed in the rules of the oligarchy and family and history, there were too many conflicting emotions for the thrill to blow the loudest note. I didn't understand when Layla invited her mother to accompany us to Shiraz, 1,000 miles south, but was grateful that she declined. We flew alone to the city where Hafez anointed 15th century preachers with attar of roses until they surrendered their Qurans for the intoxication of love. In a hotel room, which my guidebook warned might hold hidden cameras, a passing earthquake ripped the floor beneath us, and I stumbled into Layla's arms. We made love all afternoon. I had known Layla for 2 years before I allowed her to touch me. "Can you?" I asked as I stretched out on the carpet of my living room floor, while newborn birch leaves quivered outside my window. "Can you touch me as you would touch a baby?" "Yes," she said, and she did, sliding down from the couch to stroke the bridge of my nose with a curled index finger. I crawled out of a deep crevice someplace behind my breastbone then to meet her. In that Shirazi hotel room, I was still raw and shaky, holding to a new hope that bonding with a woman would not be fatal. And I remembered years earlier, tightening my courage around me to tell a woman on a mountaintop outside Vancouver that I desired her. Lightning flashed and thunder tore through my head, and I was surprised both that I expected a god to strike me dead and that he hadn't. My mother taught me by example that no woman would ever love me. My father would have killed me for cupping love in my hands and offering it to a woman. The body of the first girl I knew when I was still a girl was a landscape in which I loved to bury my hands. We met over the restaurant table where she sat and I served. She picked me up. We had sex that night, I pretending that I knew what to do. But hands were not everything, and she was not just a body. She was a landscape of emotions that wanted, and I was afraid. And then I hated her and love too, and made of it a stone that I carried to a landfill and left. For 20 years, I walked with men then and found intellectual companions with whom I could talk. For 20 years, my lovers and I talked about the psychology of the unconscious, the economics of late capitalism, the dimensions of ego, and the exact weight of spirit. But I never found a muddy-handed lover who could claw through the embankments to excavate my broken heart. When Layla found me, I was a summer wind making sport with trees in a distant canyon, where human voices never carried. I felt my own presence, longing, as I circled her breasts and curled in the valley between them. So this is how the veils are rent, I thought. So this is how separation dissolves. My heart exploded, splattering love on anyone and everyone. I became someone I had always been and never been. God was dancing in her, in me, and I wanted to create life. So this is why lovers want to bring children into the world, I thought, to create more bystanders for the rain of love to soak. Longing for Layla, I became a skin bursting with the fierce play of God loving God. So this is how the veils are rent, I thought. This is how separation dissolves. I wanted to run away from home with Layla. I wanted to forget that I had grown up, that I owned property and a retirement portfolio. I wanted a shabby apartment where we could feed each other scraps, build furniture from wooden crates, and nest in old newspapers. First, we had returned to Layla's homeland, where I pretended to be Layla's friend and made mockery in secret of the man. And now Layla, my slender Sohrab, risked 70 lashes to lay open my flesh with tooth edge and tongue. One doesn't think of a country mired in religious dictatorship where brute male force is leveled against women as a place propitious for the flowering of a girlish heart. But the feminine flowers on the trunk of Islam. Sufism, a mystical science of divine realization, is the jungle vine twining around the branches of state religion. It is the second religion of Iran, created when a woman of the 9th century, Rabia, transformed Arabic asceticism to Persian passion through mystical love. Her passionate love for the divine was so great that the Kaaba, the black box that draws thousands of Muslims to Mecca each year for their ritual pilgrimage, moved, coming, it is said, to her. Sufism celebrates the feminine, even as the call to prayer asserts the masculine 5 times a day. The feminine emerges at night. The flowers open then. The perfume escapes the bottle's neck. Night is for the receptive and the love struck.
Wow. Wow. That was absolutely beautiful. That was your ability to be descriptive is, I mean, like I feel like I just got a peek at you wanting to love. Like for me, and I think finding the first time that you allow yourself to love anyone, for me, it was when my son was born.
Ah,
I wasn't prepared for that. And when it happened, I had no control. All the little boxes in my head when it came to love were disintegrated. And it changed me for that. It didn't change the fact that I still went through life being dissociated and just mimicking things. But for this one grain of love that had burrowed into my heart, I love my sisters. My love of them grew after he was born because I was able to see, it was the first time I saw love without strings, if that makes sense.
right, yes, yeah.
Or a hidden agenda. It's why I hate fine print to this day in any shape or form. So to hear your description of Layla and about how you were intertwining fingers
Yeah.
around the gear shift and the music, and like when you're someone who is stifled emotion and then this beautiful emotion that makes you warm and gives you feelings you've never experienced in your life, you start to crave it,
Yeah.
and you make it, it becomes your focus. And then it's like just hearing you talk about her touching your nose, because that to you was probably one of the most intimate things that or to touch you like a child, one of the most
Yeah.
intimate things that you could have asked her to do,
Yeah.
because it was something completely void from
Yeah.
that little girl when
Hmm.
she was growing up.
Hmm. Exactly.
It's absolutely beautiful, absolutely beautiful. If anyone would like to come up and join us, if you have any comments or questions for Felicia about what she's read today, please join us. Uh, this space is, you know, everyone in here knows each other, and we would love for you to come up. If not, that's okay. I can still, I have plenty to talk to Felicia about, no problem at all. But if you would like to join us up on the panel, just request a mic. Everyone in here knows how that works. But it also gave me a peek behind, and it's something that, you know, a lot of us women who aren't lesbians don't see. For me though, like, there's a disconnect with me and sex. It's never varied. It's
Right.
not something that I see as intimate, right?
Right.
And I think that that's also, you know, it didn't stop me from making really bad choices because I was always in search of that kernel. I didn't know what I was in search of. So, like, I was with abusive men, or I would be in situations that weren't safe and stuff, but I didn't care because I couldn't feel fear because I had shut everything off. And I'm instinctively looking for something. And I didn't know it was the ability to love someone to let the armor down.
Right. And that's what you just said, the ability to love someone to let the armor down. That's what happens. Letting the armor down. If you live your entire life armored, and with your heart inside a fortress, to have an experience where that just stops, where the armor melts away and the fortress melts away. And then, I mean, then you're so exposed, so exposed. It's it's an awesome experience.
It's like I would assume this is what skydivers feel like when we get the first time, you know, because it's us believing in our loving ourselves. By loving someone else, it gives us the we're allowed to love ourselves if we can love someone else.
Yes, yes. And I'm
And
not even sure about I love you and you love me, or whether you both
yeah,
exist in a bubble of love, you know?
yeah. It's just like I just really love that. I'm really glad you chose that one for the last one
Oh, I had to
because
choose something that would be lighter.
it was beautiful. And I think for I did have a point. It also gave me a peek and a little bit understanding about the love between two women and that intimacy that comes with that. And I think you wrote it so beautifully.
What I mean, the entire experience, to me, was surprising in every possible way. Like being in love, it was just surprising. Everything about it was surprising. But one of the things is that I wanted to have her child. I mean, I have not ever wanted to be pregnant since I was 14, when I wanted to have 9 kids, enough to make a baseball team. But since then, I had I'd never wanted to have a child. And there I was. I was at this point, I was 45 years old, and I wanted to have her child. And it was because there's so much love, wanting more people to fling that love at.
Can we go back? Can we wind the story, the essay a little bit back to being on the mountaintop and you
Uh-huh.
felt that you were going to get struck down?
Yeah.
So that was the first time that you felt love.
Well, it
And I
was it
think
was
for
not it was not love, it was desire.
lust,
It was
yeah,
lust.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. Well, the first time that you felt something, right? In
Yeah.
that sense, because all we have really to go on when it comes is television and movies
All right.
and whatever they tell us it's supposed to be. We don't know what it feels like because it's never been present for us. So, like, so you're up there and like part of you is elated because you're embracing this, and the other part of you is like, oh, the lightning bolt's coming.
Yeah, exactly. And at that point, I mean, had I walked away from the institutional religion of Christianity when I was, 20 or 21. So it had been years, and there I was still thinking, oh my God, God's going to strike me dead. You know, like, why was that thought even in my head?
because that's the way it was like generational in your DNA, right? That you could just couldn't accept that, that love it, and they've ruined, just like they've ruined everything. When I say love is love, I'm referring in the sense that with the love that we're talking about, there's a kindness, and it's not a superficial kindness. It's we because we can read people in those moments. It was like, I either jump now or I'm never going to do this.
Yeah.
Or did you kind of feel that way?
Yes. Yeah.
So that must
Um,
have been scary,
yeah. Really scary.
but she was worth it, right? So that's what I mean, because you were worth it. And her aside, no offense to her, because I don't know her or anything about her, it was worth it for you, right?
It was. I mean, the relationship didn't last, you know. And I had to go through more heartbreak as the relationship fell apart and broke apart. The strain of being in the closet. She was not prepared to allow her family to know, you know, and I was staying with her family, with her mother, and that strain is just too great.
Do you think, because so you had two situations that you read to us today that were 2 decades apart, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that part of the other unintended consequences that are not good is that it was safer for you to explore this, that were women that were not yet comfortable with saying that they were lesbian, so there was more control about the general surroundings around it. People, you weren't having to explain having feelings in a way. Not even the fact that it was because you chose two women to take your heart chose to take a leap with, or your lust chose to take a leap with, that women weren't going to ask you to go um join others and be in groups and talk about this love, because it kind of gave you an opportunity to just covet it and have it solely to yourself in a way.
Well, you're very psychologically astute there, Peach.
I wouldn't go there. I'm just good at patterns because I'm a watcher like you.
um, Actually, the women that I had relationships with were all, to some degree, boundary pushers. And that's because I needed people to punch through my boundaries. To,
But not the two that you chose to take the leap with.
well, I chose to take.
I love you. I'm just trying to figure this out because I saw the pattern, and we're terrible at social situations, so you should be not surprised that I just made
Yeah.
it awkward.
Well,
I'm
in
just saying,
that Layla, you see, I had known her 2 years before
yeah, yeah.
we became lovers. And in those two,
How long were you guys together?
well, we were developing a friend.
Past
We
the
were
3 months.
developing past the three, a year, and then it took another couple of years to tie off the loose ends.
You said she was the first woman that you ever wanted to have a
Yeah,
child
yeah.
with. What about, was there any women along the lines that you wanted to have a long term, or just this is it, this is the only, before her? Were you in like fairly long term relationships, or did you feel that you were more you drifted in and out of relationships?
I was in a couple of longish term relationships with men, and they were not even terribly. I didn't live with them at all. I've lived with nobody in my life beyond for a month or two. I found the relationships with men easy, you know, because we were like pals, you know, and there wasn't all that much emotion involved to them.
So as since you guys kind of were in the friend zone, right, in these long term relations, there was less chance also that you were having to deal with the emotions or
Yeah,
anything.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. That
And
makes sense.
they were emotionally unavailable, you know. And God help me if I had had to be in a relationship with somebody who was emotionally available, because I sure as heck wasn't.
Yep. So it's like, so it's almost like subconsciously we would drift towards these situations where you could just focus on, because I think up until the point that we're willing to face it, like, just, I can look back to the time before, even when I came on here, I wouldn't admit I was here for myself. I was here for my sister that was gone. And then it just happened. And it's just, sometimes I feel like I always feel awkward, even on Twitter, right? It's like, why don't do DM groups or anything like that? Because I'm not good in those kind of. If it's over three people, spaces are different. There's like little switch flips in my head. I don't know why, but in general, I'm very, very awkward in holding a conversation. There's women in this space that can verify this. So it's like, if they're emotionally unavailable, then you can just get through getting through.
Yeah.
And I feel like anymore, getting through to get through is not good enough. And that's why I'm going to do my art. And I feel that's why you're publishing your book, and why you're doing all this stuff, because you love yourself enough that you know that you don't know what it may be, but there's more to it than just the past. You're more than just your past.
Yes. Yes, we're all more than just our past, because we have the possibility of change, you know. Human beings are not made of concrete, and we can always change if we want to change, or if we're receptive. You know, I really think that receptivity is maybe one of the most important human qualities, to be receptive to things that come, you know. And so there, I still have a future. I don't know how long it is, or uh, how long it'll be, but I look out at the world with openness, receptive to whatever um, fate or karma or destiny might bring. And I expect everything that I engage with in that way will change me more.
Let's talk a little bit about the fight we're in, and when you not necessarily peaked, but made the active decision to start on here, and in general speaking out as far as this female sex class.
Yeah, I'm just looking through the last chapter, where I do have some paragraphs, because I have included, you know, I didn't want to write a book that only pissed off 70% of the population. You know, I wanted to go for the whole 100%. So there is a section, a few paragraphs on this whole trans thing.
Would you like to read those to us?
I am just looking for that. Okay, this is just in the middle of the final chapter. What struck me almost from the beginning, like a punch in the face, was the insult to women. Beyond the insult of a man insisting that he was really a woman, was the insult of the entire Western world agreeing with him and nominating him again and again as Best Woman and Woman of the Year. Men are steamrolling right over women to celebrate men in parodic imitation of womanhood. And many, many women are supporting them and denouncing women who object. In the process, our institutions demolished women's rights, all of them, rather than being acknowledged as 51% of the human population, subject to oppression by the other 49%. Women are now defined as anybody who identifies as one. Women's spaces, long fought for by women, were opened up to men. Rape crisis centers, prisons, sports, changing rooms, and toilets. Women's objections have been silenced, as women's boundaries have been stripped away. This is state mandated rape on a civilizational level. It is clear that women's will, like my will as a child, has no validity. What women say is ignored. What women want is not even heard. Professional, accomplished women have no more power to affect policy than I had as a child victim of an abuse cult.
Aw- Excellent. I mean, I think that the women who are, no offense to anyone who's under 30 in here, and I know there's at least a couple, there's a large swath of us that are carry that shadow. There's women that still haven't dealt with it, everything. And I think the resolve that comes with surviving what we have is why we're going to win this fight, and why we will protect the female sex class, even from our women within our sex class that are currently trying to destroy it. And having voices like yourself, who can be very articulate, who can write like this, that is needed, because art is what changes the world. It's just the way it's always been, and that's why they want to silence women artists who are speaking out. The turban are being silenced constantly.
There's just,
Women need to support each other and realize that if you do not support the women that are in this movement who can affect the change, then we're just going to keep spinning our wheels.
yeah, it's always the case that a majority of women are invested in the status quo, which I still call the patriarchy. I know some people hate that word, but a majority of women are invested in it. They've found a way to work within it, to work with it, to make it work for them. And the number of women who wanted the vote, the suffragettes in Britain way back when they were first fighting for the vote, was a tiny, tiny fraction of the women available. And it was women objecting and saying, no, 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 you can't be giving the vote to us women. Ha ha ha, we wouldn't know who to vote for. Or ha ha ha, we would just vote with our husbands. Ha ha ha, don't give us the vote. It's always that way. And this is part of our cultural conditioning, to support the men and to support the system that the men have created. And we're isolated, in these nuclear families, we're very isolated from one another. We don't learn solidarity for each other.
You're absolutely right. That's why I call myself a gynocrat. I don't have any loyalty to two parties that were created before my sex class was allowed to even be willed property from her father or whatever, and we're not allowed to vote. We were the last to get the vote. So those parties weren't set up for any shape or form to think about what happens to women.
No.
And so, and it's like, my loyalty is to women. That is the first thing. I don't care about the labels behind that. And yeah, I think you're right. And I think the only place that you're seeing companionships, connection, solidarity, strength is within our specific movement. And I think we are the only movement, and I'm not just saying this. We are driven by something very simple, basic biology. Um and it is what how we exist as humans, why we're here. And that is, they can't refute that. And that is why we are not based off of a Bible or a Quran or Torah or any other religions or some bones thrown in a bowl in the Amazon. We are, what we do, our movement's basic core value is that women are adult human females and there's no one else. allowed in that.
Well,
And
and as adult human females, we ought to have as much authority in any society that human beings create as men do. And I
absolutely.
don't believe that we have that authority. I mean, if we had that authority, our words would mean something, you know? All those men who've decided that men can be women if they claim they are would have to stop and say, oh, wait, wait. I hear the women are saying no, you know? But they're not saying, wait, wait. They're saying, fine.
Yes. They do tend to like to blame us, and then they're the ones who are just sitting there on their hands while it's happening.
Yeah. It's
Well,
just,
Felicia, I really love that you came in today. This has been like awesome, and I want you, I really, I'm going to do some shameless plugging here. I would love to see the story of you and Layla in a blog on the Red Tent. Just saying, because it's one of the most beautiful things I've heard, honestly. It's really beautiful, and I think it gives, it's a beautiful description of two women who absolutely are enamored and consumed by each other's hearts. I just think it's beautiful. So I definitely would like to see that. Please, pretty please. Felicia was I did put a link up in the purple pill to Felicia's book. Please pass it along. Takes nothing to repost. Just please pass it along. And if you can, please go purchase it. You can get it at Felicia's website, and you can also there's a link to her website on the Red Tent site, and you can absolutely find it there.
as
Felicia,
well
let's
as
talk.
well as straight on any Amazon site, right?
Yes, yes. I'm sorry. Yes, on Amazon as
As
well.
of midnight tonight, it
Yay!
will be available.
So
Yeah.
let's finish this up with, let's talk about, you've now published your book,
Uh-huh.
did the space. How are you feeling?
Well, I'm a little uncertain, you know. Um, I cause will anybody buy the book, you know, or will I go up to Amazon to check the records and find nope, nobody's yet bought the ebook. Nope, nobody's yet bought the print book. You know, like I don't know what will happen, right? This is it's out of my hands, out of my control now. I've done everything that I could do. And you guys at the Red Tent, you know, I mean, that was absolutely wonderful that I ran into you all, sort of, so to speak, you know, on Twitter. And you're doing everything that you can to help get the word out so that people who need to read the book can find it. You know, I mean, I'm a major reason for publishing it is because there may be other people who need to read it, who would be comforted or helped somehow by reading my story. So I want them to know that the book exists.
Can you just real quick before we end, in this, and I know that feeling, Vaishnavi said something very similar when the last time we spoke. She said sometimes she sits in there and she's the only one in her YouTube channel for part of the her series on the Behind the Looking Glass. So I mean, if there's one thing I think the turban really need to work on is just being there. Doesn't Just being there doesn't cost you anything. No, I understand people don't have a lot of money right now. I get that completely. I don't have a lot of money. Um so I do what I can by resharing and resharing again and reading the Substacks and the blogs. And Felicia, you have a Substack now too.
I have had a Substack for a couple of years. Yep.
Oh, see, I'm once again, I don't, you and Kara are the really only people I subscribe to, because I just don't read them, because I've told you, if they were on the, if I wish they had an audio version, and I've already told Felicia I would like an audio version of the book, please.
And you know, I'm thinking seriously about that. Not immediately, but I do know that a lot of people prefer to listen rather than to read. And so I think, if there's some interest in the print and ebook versions, then I will be incentivized to produce an audio version in a bit of time.
Well, we will get there. We will get there. Once again, please, if you would mind either resharing the space so people can hear what Felicia had to say, or a link to her book, and give her a follow. She is a very insightful, wonderful woman who is. I love that she comes and speaks her mind in American Turf Radio and North American Angst. And to anyone else out there who's thinking about there's something they want to do like this, please reach out to the Red Tent. All Felicia did was send us a message saying, "Hey, want to do this. Can you help me?" And here we are. So if there's something that you've been working on, or something in your mind, or even if you just want to become part of the Red Tent, please go sign up. It's a free membership. You get to see my silly recipes and silly thoughts on why my body is failing right and left on the foods I'm eating. We have great blogs by our board member Cindy, great fictional stuff, and hopefully we'll have Felicia up there soon. So please go sign. And if you want to come, if you would like to be a guest on the Red Tent Storyteller, fill out the form. Felicia can verify it was not hard,
Mhm.
and come in here and tell your story. We don't put a label on what your story is. If you have something to talk about, we're here to uplift and empower women, and there's no fine print with that. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Felicia. Thanks to everyone who came in to listen. I'm really honored that you shared with us today. It means a lot to me. Um, I am going to get my copy of my book after the space. So there's at least that one. So please let us know what's going on. If you want to come back at any time and do another space, please do. It was a wonderful discussion. And whether you realize it or not, you helped me a lot today.
Well, I really appreciate your inviting me to this, and you're such a great person to have conversations with, PJ. You make it easy. So thank you. And I just
You
need a very quick reminder to people that I have one woman, two names. Felicia Rembrandt is my online version, but you will find that the name of the author of the book is a little bit different. Felicia Klingenberg. And we're all going to be Klingenbergers, which is women raising the alarm, ringing bells.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Kara Dansky. So we will get that space up next week. And it was wonderful to see everyone. And once again, Felicia, thank you so much for coming and telling your story. I mean, that's the whole point of this space.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank everybody who came. And thanks for listening, everybody.
Have a great rest of your day.
Okay, you too.